Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. My name is Artem, and here is the news. 851 days less the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Yesterday Russia again targeted Kharkiv, in particular its energy infrastructure. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said in his evening video address that a part of Kharkiv was left without electricity, the subway and electric transport were stopped. Unfortunately, 12 people were wounded, one person was killed. The president expressed his condolences to their families and close ones. Quote, every day Kharkiv suffers from this Russian terror, and every day we repeat, Russian combat aircraft that carry out these strikes not only on Kharkiv but on our other cities, on our communities, on our frontline positions. Russian combat aircraft must be destroyed wherever they are, by all effective means available, unquote. According to Zelensky, the recent authorization of strikes on Russian territory near the border has helped to destroy part of Russia's capacity, but only a part. He stressed that Ukraine needs more long-range capabilities and is working on this with its partners. In general, the next weeks of June and the first half of July should be no less productive for Ukraine than May and the first half of June. Ukrainian defenders dismissed Russian claims about the full occupation of the village of Novoalexandrivka on the Pokrovsk front, Donetsk Oblast, reports Babel. The 110th Separate Mechanized Brigade informed that a significant part of Novoalexandrivka was occupied by the Russians, but not all of it. Quote, the enemy does not fully control the settlement, unquote. Heavy fighting is currently taking place on the streets. The Russians have numerical advantage and are furiously attempting to advance, but Ukrainian defenders are making extraordinary efforts to restrain the offensive. Earlier, the Deep State Analytical Project reported that Russian troops had occupied the village of Novoalexandrivka in Donetsk Oblast near Ocheretine and approached the Pokrovsk-Konstantinivka highway. The General Staff of Ukraine informs that the enemy is also focusing its efforts on the Kurakhivka direction. We would really appreciate if you could rate us, ideally with 5 stars, and leave a glowing review in the app where you are listening to this podcast, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and others. This really helps more people to find out about the highlights from Ukraine and truth about Russia's invasion. Kyrylo Budanov, the head of Ukraine's defense intelligence, gave an interview to the Philadelphia Inquirer, reports Ukrainska Pravda. Budanov was asked whether Ukrainian troops can stop the current Russian offensive in the east of Ukraine, where Moscow is making small but steady territorial advances. He said that the situation in the east of Ukraine will remain difficult for at least a month, but there will be no Armageddon. The head of intelligence said that Ukraine will do everything possible to minimize the Russian successes. However, when asked whether Ukraine would be able to hold the city of Chasiv Yar in the Donetsk region, Budanov said, quote-unquote, I will refrain from response. He believes that the answer to Russia's superiority in terms of personnel is warfare technology, in which Ukraine has become a world leader, replacing people on the battlefield wherever possible with new versions of drones and electronic warfare. He also called himself a fan of moving the war to Russian territory with the help of long-range unmanned aerial vehicles. Quote, I have been advocating this since the very first days of the war, saying openly that so long as the war is contained on our territory, it will not affect Russia, he said. He also expressed the opinion that the White House's warning to Kyiv not to strike oil refineries makes no sense, as they are a legitimate military target. The attacks may not be able to turn the tide of the war, the intelligence chief admitted. But he believes they could affect the Russian economy and psychological state, which in turn affects the military component. The Defense Intelligence of Ukraine has announced that it considers any Russian military target within a 500-mile range to be fair game. The intelligence head also sees no point in peace talks, as Ukraine has no option but to get back what was occupied. Otherwise, the state of war will go on forever. Budanov believes that temporarily occupied Crimea could be cut off from arms supplies from Russia. At the same time, he ridiculed the idea that Moscow would use tactical nuclear weapons if control over Crimea was threatened. Quote, what use would it have? We don't have big concentrations of troops for which such nuclear weapons would be appropriate. And to break holes in our defense lines is possible with conventional means of warfare. Besides, using nuclear weapons would lead to big political risks for Putin, unquote. Thank you for listening to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast. We're a commercial initiative of just two people and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the app, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we are getting better.
We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.